Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. I have a conundrum that I need your perspective on. And the conundrum is this. Would it make sense for me to spend the money to buy a smartwatch to improve my health and fitness? Now, just for background, I'm a healthy, fit individual. I run, I bike, I lift weights, I ski. I occasionally even go hiking and swimming. But just like everybody else, I want to stay healthy. And if possible, I would like to get fitter. I definitely think that smartwatches are very cool, but at $500 to $1,200 a piece, I would like to make sure and like to be reasonably confident that it's actually going to give me some value, quite frankly, that I'm going to get insights that I don't currently have that will help me either improve my exercise regime or my sleep or my rest or something else that will deliver tangible benefits. And so nothing wrong with cool toys, but that's not what I'm looking for. And so to help me make a decision, I decided to look at two variables. First of all, is the information that the watch is going to give me accurate? And secondly, is it going to give me insights that are tangible and will help me make better decisions that I wouldn't have been able to make without the watch? Now, before we dive into it any further, this video isn't being sponsored. Nobody else has a say in what I'm going to say in this video. Second, everything that I'm going to say is from the point of view of a healthy individual. None of it constitutes any medical advice of any kind whatsoever. And anyone who needs medical advice obviously should be consulting with qualified medical professionals. And finally, I will put in titles at the bottom so you guys can jump to the sections that you're most interested in as you please. So with the two criteria, accurate and actionable, I have created a 2x2, which is 4 quadrants, and I'm going to place the different capabilities that we commonly find on smartwatches in the quadrants that I believe they belong in based on publicly available data, including a lot of good testing that's been done by many good YouTubers. I also have a category that falls outside of the quadrant, which I've called What the Heck Were They Thinking? And we'll get to that when we get to it. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. I will not be looking at any specific watch. Rather, what I'm looking is at capabilities across the different watches, and I'm keying off the best performing watch in any particular category, if you want, to deal with sort of the state of the art. What is possible for a smartwatch to do? I just thought it would be the most fair and probably useful thing to do. And finally, because I'm looking for your help, I'm obviously looking for your feedback, whether I place the right capabilities in the right categories and what value you guys are getting from it and what other perspectives you might have. So with that, let's dive in. So I'm going to start in the accurate and actionable quadrant. And the first thing is heart rate and heart rate variability. And I think we all know that smartwatches are very capable when it comes to measuring heart rate and heart rate variability. And I think we also appreciate that both are very useful and valuable. We can certainly pace our exercise by the intensity that we want to have in terms of heart rate. And both heart rate and heart rate variability are also very good at letting us know how rested our bodies are and how ready they are for exercise. Next is GPS and mapping and all the things that come with it, whether it's navigation, distance, pace, altitude. Once again, we know that smartwatches can do a very good job of that, especially those that have offline topo maps downloaded on them and very accurate GPS. Next is running power, and I know that running power is new to the wrist. It's obviously existed for a long time on bicycles. It's also existed with various pods, but now we can do it directly from the wrist without any additional equipment. And obviously it's very valuable. People have preferences, whether they want to run by pace, whether they run by heart rate, or whether they want to run by power. But there is obviously no doubt that power can be very useful. And the benefit of power is obviously that we avoid the heart rate lag effect that occurs when we measure our heart rate and trying to determine how hard we're running. The accuracy, well, it seems like it's okay and maybe even more than okay. The problem, obviously, is that there are no standards for measuring running power. And so every company does it a little bit differently, but they seem to be reasonably consistent, both internally and between themselves. So for the time being, it looks good, and I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, and so I'm going to include it in the accurate and actionable category. Next, VO2 max. Obviously, as we exercise, we'd like our VO2 max to improve, and so being able to measure that is good. It would seem, based on the data that I've seen, that sort of wrist-based VO2 max is within an error margin of plus minus 5% of lab data, which is actually not shabby at all, especially if you take into account the cost and, quite frankly, the pain involved with going to a lab and doing VO2 max. So once again, I definitely think it belongs here and is doing a good job. SpO2 measurement? Maybe. It's one of those things that it's strictly speaking not necessary for exercise. It might be good to have, of course, in case of us getting sick. Smartwatches aren't doing a great job of that. They sort of squeak by, some are better than others. And given that a commercial pulse oximeter costs less than $25, obviously nobody would be buying a smartwatch for the SpO2 measurement. But it's okay enough so that it's probably going to let you know if you're really sick and your oxygen levels sink significantly enough. And so I will include it here, but just barely. And that's it for the top quadrant of accurate and actionable. And my question is, what do you think of that? Do you agree? Do you have other perspectives? Let me know, please. Sleep stage tracking and sleep scoring is something else that many watches offer. And, question, of course, is how good is it? And my very considered opinion is not good at all. In fact, it's probably quite useless. And the reason for that is that I think it fails both on the accuracy and actionability counts. We've all seen the data. Some watches are better than others, but the reality is that none of them are particularly good. In particular, they seem to struggle with detecting REM sleep and separating it from light and deep sleep. The one that does the best job is about 70% accurate in detecting REM sleep, which is quite frankly not very good. And under the best circumstances, barely good enough to detect all the sleep cycles. And so that sort of doesn't leave me terribly excited. More to the point, I actually don't think it's terribly actionable. What are you going to do if your watch tells you that you have the wrong balance between light, REM, or deep sleep? It's not obvious that anyone could really do anything about this. The only thing we can really do is to follow the good sleep hygiene rules that I'm sure you're all very well familiar with. And if the data tells us that our sleep is bad, well, we should know that anyhow, quite frankly. But all we can really do is to check that we're actually following all of those good sleep hygiene rules. There is really nothing beyond that we can do, other than, of course, to seek professional help. But if our sleep is so bad that we need professional help, then presumably we should know that already. So I certainly see no point in sleeping with a watch to sort of tell me what my sleep looks like, because it's going to be wrong and it's not going to be useful. And I also don't see any point in paying for that capability when I buy a smartwatch, which is something that we're going to get to later. The second thing that I also think is fairly useless is sort of all this tracking of calories burned. Once again, it's not correct as far as I can tell from all the data that I've seen. And secondly, once again, it's not particularly actionable. Nutrition is a much more difficult subject than sort of this is how many calories you burn, so now go and count the calories that you're going to eat and try to balance them out. There's much more going on that's topic for a whole other video. But as far as I'm concerned, calories burned and sleep tracking and sleep scoring are in the not accurate, not useful, actionable category. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you track your sleep, Are you getting value out of that? Have you been able to make good decisions based on the data that you're getting? If you have, I'm more than happy to listen to you and more than happy to change my opinion, but I'd love to hear from you about that first. So that brings us to the two categories that are left, which are either not accurate or not actionable, and I'm going to group them together. Although at the end of them, I'm going to show them to you in different quadrants. So the first one is steps. And I really don't think there is any value in counting steps. Your body certainly doesn't count steps, and steps aren't really a proxy for anything. The body really is more concerned about effort, which is a product of time and intensity. And so I don't think anyone should be counting their steps, and I certainly don't attribute any value to that. Next is ground contact time. And I'd mentioned ground contact balance before, which I think is very important because it can pinpoint imbalances that we have. But ground contact time per se, I think, is not particularly useful because it's obviously going to depend on terrain. It's obviously going to depend on pace. And so there is nothing that I can do with it in isolation that I find particularly meaningful. And I feel the same way about stride length. Clearly stride length is a function, at least to some extent, of pace, to some extent of terrain, and to some extent based on our technique, of course. But once again, using the stride length from a watch to try to change your technique just sounds like a really bad idea. So, I really don't see what anyone could or would want to do with that. Next, recovery time projections. Again, the question is sort of recovery from what? Is it my running? Is it my bicycling? Is it my weightlifting? I actually haven't seen these watches being terribly accurate at that, and I don't really see how they could be. From my point of view, the true measure is really resting heart rate variability, which you get in the morning, and then in the morning you can sort of decide, all right, this is the shape that I'm in. It's either within my normal range, and I can go and work out hard, or it's not, and I need to take it easy. But a smartwatch trying to project that just doesn't strike me as being all that reliable. It would be useful if it was, but I don't think it is, given sort of the complexity of the human body and the various activities that we engage in. Training suggestions, I think, fall in a similar category. Once again, to develop a good training plan really requires you to know what the objectives are, what are we trying to accomplish here, and then the plan itself needs to be comprehensive. It's not just going to be aerobic activities, there needs to be resistance training, there could be other elements involved in it as well, and I just haven't seen any smartwatches being, quite frankly, smart enough to come up with comprehensive training plans. I mentioned in the video that there were a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about that fall outside of the quadrant. And so this is what I'd like to talk about now. And the first one is training readiness. And it just baffles me that someone would come up with and try to calculate training readiness. Not because I don't think it would be useful, but simply because we already know what our training readiness is. If you check your resting heart rate and your resting heart rate variability, that is your training readiness. That is your body's message to you of how ready you are to train. So why would someone find the need to come up with formulas that try to take into account sleep and rest and exercise for God knows how many days to try to come up with something that is exactly heart rate and heart rate variability, but probably not nearly as accurate, because how are you going to construct something that is more accurate than what the body is already telling you? So I am perplexed by this one. If any of you have a better understanding of it than I do, then I'd certainly love to hear about it and like to sort of understand what you make of it. But to me, I just don't get it. The second one that I don't get, that baffles me just as much, if not even more, is 24/7 heart rate tracking. And once again, I really don't see the purpose of that. What value is it supposed to deliver? Yes, our heart rates are going to vary throughout the day because of various stresses, some of which are going to be voluntary, some of which are going to be involuntary. And what does it tell us? I'd love to know if any of you who actually have tracked your heart rate for the last 24 hours for what value you get from that. What insights does it give you? Because I've never seen it give me any insights, and I really don't see what it would. Once again, going to the previous point, if you look at heart rate and heart rate variability first thing in the morning, that should give you a pretty good measure of sort of how rested and how ready for life and exercise you are. And so, what value is tracking your heart rate 24/7, day in and day out, going to add in addition to that? So, that brings us to the conclusion. And as far as I'm concerned, a smartwatch is a tool, just like a hammer or a screwdriver. You take it out to do the job that it's designed to do. And my concern with smartwatches, once again, with regards to health and fitness, is that they obviously have features that are good. That's the top right-hand quadrant that we've gone over. But they also come with a variety of different features that are either useless or not accurate or not actionable, and that we're nonetheless paying for. And so that's really my dilemma. Are the features that are good and useful worth the money that we have to pay, anywhere from $500 to $1,200 for a smartwatch? And do they justify buying them because of the insights that that is going to give us? And should we therefore just ignore all the bad features that we've paid for anyhow? Because, who cares? They're there, but we're not going to use them. We're just going to use the good ones. And so at this point in time, I would really like to hear from you. If you have a smartwatch and you're using it for your health and for exercise and training, which features are you using? Which features do you find valuable? Do you agree or disagree with my assessment? And so where and how? And overall, what value are you getting from your smartwatch? So thanks for watching. Be well, and I look forward to your feedback. Take good care. Bye-bye.